All right, good evening and welcome to American Advocates. Just going to go live a little bit later than normal to cover what I just witnessed during the State of the Union address speech from President Donald Trump of 2026, of course. And coming off the high, that is the speech being delivered with obvious propaganda and charm and charisma and aura. You know, it's really what the speech was. The entirety of the speech, truthfully, was Trump aura. You know, Trump flexing on Democrats in a humorous way a lot of times. I laughed. I loved a lot of it, to be honest with you. But it's important to take a deep breath. It's important to do what I did. I took notes on everything he was saying. I took a deep breath after the speech ended. I listened to the Democrat response delivered by Abigail Spanberger, the now governor of Virginia, who won that state by 15 points, what was previously known as a purple state, won by 15 points by a Democrat who labeled herself as a moderate, of course, and is anything but, as we're finding out based off of what she's signing into law for her state now. And the fact of the matter is, when you take a deep breath and you look at what was said during the speech and you look at the contrast of Trump's State of the Union address speech with the Democrat response speech, you can see the differencing in messaging, and you can see how things have shifted quite a bit, in all honesty, along over party lines. And I want to just go over I took notes, detailed notes on the talking points of President Donald Trump and his State of the Union address speech. You know, obviously it started off with excessive applause. I laughed at a lot of stuff. I love a lot of the showmanship. There's just no way around it. I am the kind of person that will warn you against being influenced by propaganda, but at the same time, I'm an American and I'm a conservative. And so I eat up the propaganda in the moment, and I at least enjoy it for what it is before I prepare to call it out. So I loved a lot of it. I loved the messaging. I loved the antics. I loved the showmanship. It's part of the reason why people like Trump. And so the applause just went on forever, and Trump was just aura farming all the way all the way down the speak, just absorbing the applauses that just never seemed to end. USA chants broke out. I love USA chants. We should always have USA chants. It's patriotic. It gives me goosebumps. It inspires me. So the USA chants broke out, and it was just very energizing. And then Trump started his speech, and he went right into it, and he started talking about his major accomplishments. And he really started off with the stuff that he definitely knew and was definitely told to talk about in order of popularity with Americans and in the order of what Americans would actually enjoy hearing about the most, for sure, because one of the first topics he went into discussing was border security. And as he should, because in all honesty, no matter how critical you want to be of President Donald Trump, even as a conservative, I've been very critical of him over the past several months. You cannot take away his border security accomplishment. It's been pretty impressive. It was much necessary. It was much needed. It was a much needed accomplishment. It was something we voted for, in all honesty. It was something that most Americans could recognize was very harmful to our nation, just open borders, allowing anybody to pour into our country. And it's turned out that there's been a lot of negative side effects from having open borders for so many years in this nation. And so President Donald Trump got right to work on that, and rightfully now he's gloating about his success with it. Zero crossings is what he touted, and to be honest with you, I think that's a little bit of propaganda. I'd be actually shocked if it was actually zero. I'm sure people have tried. I'm sure the number of people that succeed in crossing our border illegally is still more than zero. But the bottom line is, for sure, no matter what, it is significantly lower. It's actually miraculously lower, almost, in all honesty. So rightfully, President Donald Trump bragged about the secure borders on his speech. And somewhere around this time, once again, we humorously saw Al Green, the same musty-looking Texan, being escorted out of the speech for the second time, even though the first time was last year and it technically wasn't an actual State of the Union address from Trump. It was just labeled as such last year. This year it officially is, and Al Green causing a ruckus once again, being escorted out by the sergeant at arms for his disruption. No doubt this will lead to another pointless censorship of him, which will lead to no real consequences because the Republicans don't have any balls to follow through on anything. But it was funny. It was just funny to watch him be escorted out during the talks of border security and immigration policy reform. And I love, like I said, I don't care how low hanging fruit it is. I love the shouting. In all honesty, if the State of the Union address speeches didn't have the performative actions, the performative stuff taking place, if it didn't have the shouting and the ruckus, then I probably wouldn't watch it. To be real with you, I tune into the State of the Union address speeches just for the antics. So I was actually happy to see it. To be honest with you, it's like getting to watch a movie once a year, from a political perspective. So President Donald Trump discussed border security, obviously. Then he went off on his usual, tangents, and he wound up because yesterday I posed the question. For instance, I said, what is President Donald Trump going to do? What's he going to do tomorrow? He's made a lot of mistakes. He's done a few good things, but he's done a lot of stuff that's harmed his popularity. It's hurting his presidential rating. His approval rating is lower than it was in his first term currently, according to most polls. And even Rasmussen, his most favorable poll, has shown a decline in his approval rating. At one point, dipping down to 41%, which for Rasmussen, that's pretty low. And it's even lower at some points on some polls than Biden's approval rating was. And in my mind, that's mostly rightfully so. Like I said, I voted for Trump. I'm socially and fiscally conservative, but President Donald Trump has been very distracted by a lot of different foreign entanglements and different foreign obstacles, foreign agendas, and he's made some flat out really bad decisions lately, with a few good ones sprinkled in. And so I posed that question last night. I said, what will he do? What will he do during his allotted time? What will he talk about? What will we be seeing out of him? And this is an example of, I wouldn't say it's not filibustering, but it's like he talked about the Winter Games and the Olympics for like kind of a great. I was busy working, but I had my headphone in, right? And I had my notepad. I was taking notes in between working. And I just remember thinking, like, man, he's really rambling on about these Olympic Games. And I am someone who's all about glory to America. That's how I end all my streams, glory to America. So when it came to the Olympic Games and the men's hockey team, et cetera, winning, I love that. I was very thrilled about that, and I think it's worth celebrating. But Trump just went on. He just kept talking about it for like a long time, like minutes and minutes on end. And so that was something I noted here was just he really spent a long time on it. And I don't know if I heard this right, because like I said, I was working. So if somebody's watching this and I'm wrong on this, feel free to correct me. But he referenced giving out the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and he was talking about a hockey goalie. I don't know. Hopefully I heard that wrong, and he was getting ready to move on to some other topic when it came to the Presidential Medal of Freedom. But yeah, I mean, he was just going off, and then he talked about the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the goalie for the men's hockey team in the Olympics being the best goalie he's ever seen. And it was like, that's just something that you reference for like, 2 minutes, but Trump wound up talking about it for like 15 minutes, it felt like. It just kind of dragged on a little bit too long. Minor criticism, but kind of points to something obvious here, in my opinion, of what's going on with this Trump administration. And it kind of points to something obvious, in my opinion, that he would talk about the Olympic Winter Games for like 10 to 15 minutes when there's a lot more to talk about, way more important stuff, to be honest with you. So, hey, Dial Up, what's up, man? Happy to have you back, man. Appreciate you. By the way, I see viewers are kind of coming in here. I can actually barely see the viewer count because I have this green screen background up of this was Trump's so-to speech bingo, by the way. Actually, a lot of this, they got a lot of stuff wrong on this one. He didn't talk about Black Latino Americans but yeah, I can't see the viewer count that well, but please double tap the screen if you haven't already to like the stream, because it really does help the stream perform well in the algorithm if you're on your cell phone. So green screen shows effort. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I got to put in some effort if I'm going to do these streams while living in my car, So after the hockey and the Olympic discussions, he moved on to talking about the floods. He was talking about these floods that occurred, the disaster in our nation, and he was mentioning some sort of a veteran, I guess, that was helping out during the floods, and he really prattled about the heroics of it all. This was another feel-good story that was discussed, and it's like there's nothing wrong with discussing it, but again, the State of the Union address speech is, I'm looking for more than what I was getting up until this point. And so he rambled on about that, and it's like, it's good stuff. It's nice to hear about these kind of stories, but to the extent that we heard about them tonight, and it's a recurring theme that you'll notice in the notes that I took, it's like it was too much for me. It was too much. I don't mean to sound calloused, in all honesty, I'm not trying to sound like an absolute douchebag, but it's like at some point, like, the 15-minute long, 20-minute long stories of these heroes, it's like you can cut that down a little bit. No offense to them. I'm happy to know that there are that many heroic Americans in our country, but what I felt like what was happening with stories like that is, once again, it's just like it's kind of just stalling for time. So it is what it is. I'm not trying to put down the hero, but I just got to call it for what it is. After that, he wound up moving on to the big, beautiful bill. And this was something I actually forgot to discuss too much yesterday when I was making my predictions on what Trump would talk about. I'm surprised that I didn't really think to mention this one. It's probably one of the few accomplishments of Congress so far, in one of the laziest Congresses we've seen in modern history, hardly passing anything. And they kind of use the big, beautiful bill to justify that, because they claim it's something to the effect of like 37 bills wrapped up in one. And so that's how Congress, I think, justifies their lack of performative action last year. So I forgot to mention that, and that should have been an obvious one in my predictions yesterday on what Trump would talk about heavily. And he did, and kind of rightfully so. The big, beautiful bill is a mixed bag of goods. You'll hear this notion that it's not actually real, and that anything that was signed into effect, there's no clause anymore of where there's for no tax on tips. You hear that all the time. But in the discussion today, he was referencing it, and he did bring a waitress, a random waitress who gets tipped and now is going to get an extra like $5,000 per year because she doesn't have to pay taxes on her tips, and how it's going to benefit her family. And again, it's nice, but it's like it's a little performative. And I'm not one of the liberals that subscribes to this whole, the big, beautiful bill, it's all fake. There's still going to be tax on tips. It's like, all right, you just don't know what you're talking about at that point. So he wound up talking about that. And then even funnier, after he gave us the emotional story behind the big, beautiful bill and that random waitress girl who's now going to earn an extra $5,000 a year because she doesn't have to pay taxes on her tips. During the applause, he turns and looks to the Democrats and he goes, "And every single Democrat voted against it. You all voted against it." And it's just like, this is the stuff that makes it hard for me to want to criticize him, because it does win me over somewhat. I want to love Trump so bad. I really do. I voted for the guy. He started off first 2 months of his presidency this term were great. He's done some good stuff. He says hilarious shit. He's fucking based and hilarious, full of aura. But it's just at the end of the day, I have to criticize the stuff that he's doing wrong, and he's making a lot of mistakes. But moments like that, it's just like it gets me every time. It's like I'm borderline a fan again, and then I have to take a step back, like I'm doing right now, to take a deep breath and remind myself, okay, there's propaganda, there's charisma and charm, salesman-like charm, and then there's reality, and that's what this stream's really all about today, reality. So. Dial Up says, I'm sure of the big, beautiful bill because Biden did a big, beautiful bill too. I smell NGO tendrils. Yeah, good. Don't be a zealot. Yeah, I'm not a zealot. But it's undeniable. Trump's fucking hilarious. It doesn't matter what he does. He's always going to be funny to me. I'm just always going to appreciate that. I'm just always going to appreciate his methodology and his tactics, even if his strategy overall is poorly implemented and largely failing. From here, he went into the tariffs, actually. I was wondering when he would discuss the tariffs. I think he appropriately placed the tariffs in this early on segment of his State of the Union address speech. They are an accomplishment, in my opinion. He is definitely hilarious. Yeah, he is. I'm glad you can agree with me on that. Let me see. I'm going to show a hidden comment here. Why is it? There we go. White men in America. I'll show that. I don't really care. White men in America have been neutered by Israel. Well, I have not been neutered by Israel, so. Okay. He moved on to the tariffs. These are an actual accomplishment, in my opinion, the tariffs. And I'm pro-tariff on this channel. Like I said, I have been since pretty much day one. My literal first long-form video on this channel was about the tariffs and the good that they could possibly do for our nation. And so he celebrated the generated revenue that was brought in by our tariffs, hundreds of billions of dollars. And then he immediately dove right into SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, saying they gave a shameful ruling on the tariffs, And all the while he's talking about this, you see Chief Justice Roberts' face. He's sitting there like an absolute slob, just sitting there looking depressed and getting absolutely mogged by Trump, while Trump's just ragging on the Supreme Court for ruling against it. And it was, again, once again, just hilarious. I love the camera work during these things. It's like the cameramen are so on point every single time. More examples of this to come as I continue monologuing on this. I'll reference other examples, but it's like the cameramen are on point. It really feels, at certain points, it feels like a fucking Jerry Springer episode, honestly. And I just love it. It's just like, it's phenomenal. And it's phenomenal in large part because Trump is an unusual, atypical Republican, willing to just call them out to their faces and not maintain established decorum on his end, knowing that the Democrats aren't there to do so either. They're hooting and hollering during this time. Al Green's already been escorted out by this point for once again trying to disrupt everything. And so Chief Justice Roberts just sitting there getting mogged by Trump, hilarious. They later show Amy Coney Barrett, who Trump himself appointed, who wound up ruling against Trump on the tariffs and other things in the past. She looks weathered and beat down and worn out and absolute bitchy. She just looks bitchy. She looks beat. She looks miserable. And he's just going off about this. And then he celebrates what he calls a major win. And if what he's saying is true here, it is actually kind of a win, because this is disaster control at this point for the tariffs. And he says, according to Trump anyway, we'll see what the reality of this is over the coming weeks as it all plays out and unfolds. But according to Trump in his State of the Union address speech, despite the fact that the Supreme Court ruled against his implementation of the tariffs using the IEEPA laws, the International Economic and Emergency Powers Act, despite that, according to Trump, every country or most, I can't remember if he said most or every, but it's the vast majority at the very least of countries that have already worked out trade deals with us in accordance with the defined amount of tariff percentages on them. They're happy with the deal still, according to Trump, and they're not looking to renegotiate. Now, this very obviously could be propaganda again. It could just be blatantly Trump covering the disaster up and claiming absolute victory no matter what, because that is that's basically Trump's manifesto. That's Trump's creed. Always claim victory, never admit defeat, always claim victory, never apologize, etc. And so I'm wary of that, but if that's true, that is actually kind of a win. And I've already covered the fact of the matter, too, being that the Supreme Court didn't actually rule against the tariffs at all anyway. They only ruled against Trump using the IEEPA to establish the tariffs that he did. And so the tariffs aren't going anywhere, and basically Trump just has to go through the proper channels and means to implement them still. And with that kind of a foresight, it's actually why I don't have the hardest time believing that the countries want the tariff deals that they already have, because they know, I think they know, and this is actually, again, this is why I like Trump and I like his tariff policy and why I do give Trump his credit where it's due. I think the countries do know if they try to take advantage in the short term right now with the chaos of the SCOTUS ruling against Trump on using IEEPA to implement the tariffs, I think they know Trump will be furious and that he will try to come down on them heavier with future tariff higher percentages in the future using the proper means, which won't be able to be challenged. So I think it's actually, I actually don't have that hard of a time believing that one. And that's a win. That is actually a win. And the fact of the matter is I don't think we're going to have to thankfully pay back at least the exporters for the revenue that they had to put in towards covering part of the cost of the tariffs either, since technically the tariffs never went anywhere. Themselves. The courts did not rule against the actual tariffs. Very important to understand that. And so the trade deals will remain in place, according to President Donald Trump. That is a win if it's true, and I don't have a hard time believing it's true, though I am certainly willing to admit that it's untrue in the future if it goes that direction too, because you just don't know sometimes. Trump then goes on from the tariffs to mention Obamacare, and this was another hilarious segment. He directly just immediately lays into the Democrats again and looks at the Democrats and blames them and calls them. He says that's because of you. It's just great stuff. Obamacare was a disaster. It still is a disaster largely. And Trump goes on to discuss in the context of Obamacare what he's doing with his administration to try to fix that. He references TrumpRx.gov, where you can go get prescriptions for a much cheaper price. He mentions the options for cheaper health care, restoring our right to basically select our own health care again, which is important for insurance purposes. And he actually goes on to call Congress. He calls Congress out and says, you need to codify what is it called? The Most Favored Nations Law. And this is actually one of those laws that I'm a huge fan of because I despise NATO. And I despise NATO for a whole host of different reasons. But one of those reasons being NATO takes advantage of us every step of the way, and they've been doing so for decades. And gradually, each decade, it seems like they get away with more and more up until very recently. By the way, please be sure to double tap your screen if you're watching your phone. It likes the stream, and that really helps the stream perform well in the algorithm. Also, subscribe to American Advocates if you haven't already. Anyways, the Most Favored Nations Act really basically puts the hammer down on European countries relying on American funding for their cheaper medicine, their cheaper prescriptions, at the expense of us, once again, at the expense of Americans. And when you find out that that's been going on for years now, it's honestly infuriating. And so I actually really do support that. It was another great reminder to me of something good that President Donald Trump has done. Because I'll freely admit, as critical as I've been of Trump over the past several months, it is easy to get lost in all of the negativity, for sure. And that's why I purposely still watched what I call the MAGA cheerleader channels, because they're going to over sensationalize the accomplishments. But it's important to remind yourself of what's happening in the whole picture, the picture as a whole, what Trump's actually trying to achieve. And it's not all bad. You know, Trump is still trying at least to do good stuff. Trump has done a few good things. And simultaneously, Trump is making major mistakes and being very unpopular in a lot of ways as well, right? So the picture as a whole is displayed here when you're paying attention to both sides, really, and you're understanding the fair criticism along with the actual fairness in regards to inspecting his accomplishments. So he called on Congress to codify the Most Favored Nations Act and make it law. And I'm a huge supporter of that idea as well. And I was happy to see Trump actually calling out Congress and the Senate several times tonight, because the fact of the matter is this Congress is atrocious. They're one of the laziest Congresses in modern history. They've gotten so little done. And it's really a disgrace. It's a disgrace to everyone who voted Republican, in some cases for the first time, only to really see what full Republican control and power looks like. Because there's really no excuse for all the stuff that we were promised to not be getting done or done already, other than the fact that Republicans don't know how to wield power at all, and they look pathetic right now. So he at least called out Congress over that, and he called out Senate too, and that's a great thing. Trump went on to also announce something else, a major concern of mine, actually, when it came to big tech and the expansion of big tech in our cities, building data centers, relying on our electricity and our electrical grid way more. This is a topic that I've discussed at length twice now so far on this channel, and it was basically in regards to the fact that I mentioned the average citizen who lives in a town or a city where data centers are being built or where big tech is moving in and taking up much more of the electrical grid. The citizens are the ones that are responsible to foot the increase in electrical bill more, because the companies are jacking up the price. The companies pay what's deemed their fair share of the price. But in all honesty, the companies are putting a lot of demand on these electrical grids, and it's really not fair to these citizens who have been living there for years and have come to expect a certain electric bill rate per month. And a lot of these people are reporting, centered around AI development, big tech, data center development. They're reporting an increase of 20 to 30% in their monthly electrical bills, which equates to anywhere between 25, 30, $40 extra a month, and that's honestly absurd. And so Trump actually moved on from calling Congress to codify the Most Favored Nations Act for fair and cheaper prescriptions for Americans. He moved on to announce that a big tech electrical plan, and called out big tech for this, and basically announced a plan or some sort of an act he would sign that would require big tech to pay a lot more for this, basically. This will actually ease the burden on Americans and make it way more fair. That, again, I'm at least in favor of. I'm not a huge AI pusher on this channel. Excuse me. He didn't mention regulating AI whatsoever during this speech, and he's not going to. And that's a problem for me as well, like I said. We'd be facing the same problem if it was Kamala, though, so it's not one of those problems that I single out the Republican side of the aisle for. This is just what would be a problem no matter who's in office, because they look at it as a technological advancement. And he didn't mention regulating AI at all, but at the very least, part of the problem of AI developing at the pace that it is and expanding at the pace that it is requiring these data centers to be built that really jack up the price of electrical costs of electrical bills for Americans. He at least is acknowledging that as a problem in accordance with big tech doing it, and he at least referenced it. And I was actually once again happy to see that. But Mad Rush 2.0 says Trump had a great speech. Depends on what you call great. I'm here to dispel I'm here to help tone down what I call the propaganda of that speech, while freely admitting that I ate it up while it was happening because I love the energy of it, and I do love American propaganda, and I love USA chants, and I want to love Trump. So I'm halfway with you on that, but I'm also here to bring us back to reality too. So this is going to be a halfway depressing stream, while mixed with the good as well, like I'm going over right now. So I'm not completely there with you though, Mad Rush. Only halfway there with you. Some odd things he said, but he did have a very good speech, says bear blasting. Yeah. I mean, that's true too. I already covered how in all honesty, there was a lot of slop that was delivered tonight too as well. GOP slop, GOP slop, I guess we'll call it. And, the Olympics and the focusing way too much on the Winter Games, in my opinion, was one of them. And I said earlier when I first went live, I don't want to sound calloused, but it's like the feel good stories are nice, but it's like, my God, they took up so much time, and I want to hear more about his economic plan going forward. I want to hear more about his immigration plan going forward. I want to hear more about what's been done in regards to those things. I want him to talk about foreign policy, knowing that I very likely will get enraged by it and won't agree with most of it. But and he did, but there was all these segments of these heroes and stuff. And it's like, it's nice. I'm glad they're getting their dues. I'm glad they're getting attention for their heroism. But like at some point, it's like I'm looking down at the clock. And I'm like, all right, it's been like 15 minutes. When are we moving on? When are we talking about real things that's affecting everyone as a whole? So, and yeah, that's the fact of the matter there. So from there. From there, Trump was kind of on a roll. Actually, he started talking about the Fair Nations Act for cheaper drug prices. He moved on to talking about, like I said, big tech and the electrical demands, and then he got right into houses. And so this was like the segment of his speech where it's like, this is the stuff that sounds good if it's actually happening, and is it actually happening is the question. I think in part he's trying to make some of this happen. I do. I'm not completely bought into him on these topics, because when you look at his actions and when you look at what he's said in the past combined with what he's currently focused on, I have my doubts, and I think I rightfully have my doubts. But he was on a roll here, and so he goes right into homes, and he says homes are for people, not corporations. Fucking excellent. Spot on, based, exactly what needed to be said. For people who are in real estate or understand real estate or are buying a home currently or trying to buy a home currently, or even just paying attention to the housing market, then you understand how real this is and how much this needs to be discussed. Because yes, BlackRock is an example of a company that has been buying up residential homes out from underneath American people. And that just shouldn't be allowed. At some point, these real estate entities, I'll call them, they need to be commercial and strictly commercial. Homes are for people. I completely agree with that notion. And I was very happy to hear him say that. And he was talking about how he's implemented at least the idea. I don't know how far he's gone with it, but he has. I remember when this hit the news, at least, banning Wall Street firms from buying residential. Yes. And, at some point, again, I've discussed this dilemma on my channel at length. At some point you have to understand that capitalism does actually go too far. And I am a free market capitalist overall. I truly am. I don't like the bailouts, for instance. I've mentioned that. I've mentioned allowing colleges to go out of business if they're so dependent on 600,000 Chinese students coming into our country every year. Maybe we should ban the students and allow the colleges to go out of business or be forced to economize, for instance, and shrink down to an affordable size. That's free market capitalism, So I've mentioned stuff like that before, and I am not a socialist. But at some point, you have to look at what I call crony capitalism. And the fact of the matter is, it does get to a point where we are being taken advantage of by these large, powerful corporations, and you have to decide to do something about it. And if you're going to go down the path of doing something about it to benefit Americans, then National Socialism, in some regards, in some very limited cases, is appropriate. And I've discussed that at length when it comes to AI, for instance, and regulating domestic AI intentionally to benefit the everyday American who otherwise will wind up being replaced by AI. That's an example where it's like, that's not very free market, that's not very capitalistic, but it's in the best interest of Americans. And when it comes to these large Wall Street firms buying up residential, this is another example. Stay out of residential. And I agree with the notion. Homes are for people, right? Homes are for people, not for corporations. So I was actually thrilled to hear him say that as well. And once again, like I said, this is the role that he was on at this point, and it abruptly ended in a split second. I'm going to cover that in 1 second. But that was some of the good that he did mention in his State of the Union address speech tonight. I see. Let me catch up on the chat here. Trump is an awesome president that was needed. His policies have saved America. All right, that's a bit, that's quite some rhetoric right there, and I wish that were true. I think that that's a percentage true, but I'm not in full agreement with you on that one. Not by any stretch of the imagination. I am a conservative, but there's a lot. Trump is really making a lot of mistakes here. Hopefully, tonight was a reframing largely, because what was said tonight in a lot of ways is better than what's actually being done. And so if what was said tonight is an indicator of the direction this administration is looking to go, then yeah, maybe I'll be able to be on the same page as you, Joe wears a drool bib. Maybe I'll be able to get on the same page as you a year from now, if what was said tonight is actually a indicator of a directional change by this administration. But as it stands right now, Trump has messed up a lot, and that's just the hard facts. So after being on a roll, Trump goes from discussing, the Fair Nations Act, stopping America from being taken advantage of once again by our European allies when it comes to prescription drug cost and healthcare cost, calling on Congress to codify the act and make it law. He then moves on to, once again, like I said, what was that other one that he talked about here? The big tech and the electrical plan, excellent stuff. Then goes into homes being for people and stopping Wall Street firms from buying residential, great stuff. And then he goes and mentions Social Security and Medicare and how we have to protect those. And that's for me where he lost me, because guess what? I'm not a boomer, I'm a millennial. I view Social Security and Medicare as an absolutely unrealistic, borderline socialistic practice that's completely unattainable for me to ever experience. I will not ever experience Social Security, and I would love it very much, in all honesty, if there was a reality where we could snap our fingers and make both of those entitlements disappear into thin air. Bottom line is, these are borderline socialist policies, and they're a detriment to our national debt, and they're really a detriment to everybody at this point. They're unsustainable. Protecting them is basically just extending their expiration date, which is inevitable at this point. And I really do just need to get down and crack down on making an actual long-form video on all of the problems with Social Security. The main problem being, it's literally not realistic. And like anything, AI is going to speed up its doom, because Social Security is dependent on a strong labor force being intact. When Social Security was implemented back in the 30s, I believe, 1938, the exact year escapes my memory, but when it was implemented, we had an insane ratio of workers to retiree. It was something like 42 to 1 or 43 to 1. But every decade since its implementation, that ratio has gotten worse and worse in drastic fashion, to the point now where we're under a 2-to-1 ratio of worker to retiree, which is why it's not sustainable. And that AI is not going to make that better. AI is going to take away very likely 50% of our jobs in the next 5 years. And so with less workers in the workforce, Social Security is literally going to bottom out and collapse. I believe it's inevitable, and I believe it's going to be a massive bubble that pops one day, very soon, very likely. And it's going to be a detriment on all of the people, all of the boomers who say that they worked their ass off to be in the position that they're in now, but for some reason have to live off of socialism in the form of Social Security. They're all going to they're not going to know what to do when it bursts, if they're still alive. And a lot of them probably will be. We're already seeing an instance where 7% of retirees are returning to the workforce because they're not even getting all the full entitlements that they were promised. And therein lies the problem with semi-socialist programs. They always overpromise and underdeliver because it's the government at the end of the day that's managing the money. It's a detriment to our national debt, like I said, and him promising to protect it for me as a millennial turns me off. If I was president, I would eliminate those. And that upsets a lot of people, and I just don't give a shit anymore. I deal in reality, not fantasy land with happy sunshine and rainbows, where old people just get to work one job their whole life, never do anything smart with their money, take complete advantage of a great economy in the 80s, and then sit around and just die slowly living off of entitlements. That's really not what life's all about. So that's where he kind of started losing me. He then went into 401ks from there, and he lost me even more to a degree, but kind of pulled it back a little bit and at least acknowledged one of the problems I discuss on this channel with 401ks. So he tied in 401ks with the Social Security talk, obviously. This is a pro-boomer kind of segment of the State of the Union address speech here on Trump's part, appeasing the boomers. Trump is the boomers' last gasp, in all honesty, so it makes sense. And he does tout it, and he says, "Oh, the 401ks, average 401k is $30,000 higher this year, $30,000 higher." And that's great news for people that have 401ks. But in my mind, while I'm listening to this at work, I'm thinking to myself, that's wonderful news for I believe it's less than half of Americans, but somewhere around 50% of Americans that have a 401k. Meanwhile, the rest of us don't even have one. So what does it matter? Now, as I'm thinking that, Trump actually mentions this, and it actually shocked me a little bit. It shocked me that he actually knew to talk about this, but he did, and so props to him for at least referencing this notion. And he announces a new plan for the other 50% of Americans without a 401k, and says they don't have access to these retirement plans yet. 50% of Americans, that is, and he announces a plan he's going to put a plan in place that will open up the opportunity for those Americans to achieve or acquire this kind of a retirement plan. So, do I care about that? I'm not so sure, but I was happy at least he was in the know. At least he understood that, because you cannot. That's one of the big gripes that I have with him on this channel. There's a generational gap currently happening in this country. The boomers are in the autumn of their life. They're getting ready to leave politics, those who are in power, and the rest of them are retiring or retired already. And what you're experiencing right now is the massive divide that's created because the economy has taken a complete turn for the worst overall after Gen X. So millennials are struggling. Gen Zers are taking doomer pill. Gen Zers literally are doomers. Gen Zers look at millennials who are failures, and they look at Xers and boomers who basically made out like bandits. And Gen Zers look at their future and they think, you know what? Honestly, what's the point of any of this? And that's the divide. And so the fact of the matter is that's part of the problem here. And at least Trump was acknowledging some of it, in the form of the fact that a lot of Americans don't have a 401k. So that's one of my criticisms. He kind of made a little bit of progress towards acknowledging some of the issues here, I guess. But hey, Squidman, I recognize you. Welcome back, man. Not good, but also not bad. Yeah, pretty much. The speech felt good, I always give Trump credit. He is a great salesman. There's a lot of TDSers out there who will tell you otherwise, but he does have the aura, the charisma. He's got the energy for sure. And so the speech overall felt good, but you got to take a deep breath afterwards and really process it all, which is why I took notes while I was at work listening to it, and I'm breaking it all down right now. One of the things he also went on to say that won me back a little bit. We were experiencing the highs and lows of Trump, this State of the Union address speech. One of the things that really brought me back was when he mentioned Congress not being able to benefit from insider knowledge when it comes to trading on the stocks. And weirdly enough, this was actually a weird moment compared to last year's technically not State of the Union address speech, but compared to last year's speech where Democrats stood up for absolutely nothing. Of all statements made tonight, the first one I noticed Democrats standing up for was Trump referencing this, saying that Congress shouldn't be able to benefit from insider trading knowledge. And by the way, I completely agree. It's massively corrupt what these congressmen and women do. You look at examples like Nancy Pelosi, who has, or you look at Ilhan Omar. You look at all of these people who get these positions, and all of a sudden their net worth just skyrockets so unrealistically. To me, it's criminal. To me, it actually should come with consequences. And with this administration, that's unfortunately way too much to ask for. There will not be any arrests made, significant big name deep state arrests made during this administration at all. At this point, I am just convinced of that. I'm willing to just put that out there as a prediction. I'm willing to stand corrected if I'm wrong on that, because I hope to God I'm wrong. But least of all, when it comes to stuff like insider trading for Congress, there's no way in hell that they'll ever go after Nancy Pelosi. She made her millions. She acted corrupt. She was despicable. And guess what? She got away with it, and she will die a free woman. That's reality. Republicans don't have the spine to do what is necessary in regards to that. So he took a stand on that. I was happy about that. This, of course, led him into the Somali fraud. And this was a funny segment again, because Democrats really got triggered at this one. This is where the Democrats, it was very clear that they did not want this being discussed, right? This was supposed to be a Democrat secret, mainly because Democrats are pro-open borders and pro-immigration. And this is one of the worst looking images that could have hit the mainstream news for them. In fact, mainstream news that it was complicit, in all honesty, in the cover-up of this Somali fraud, because we had an inkling of an idea that this was occurring back in 2021, and no mainstream media news sources covered it, not even Fox. They all were content to just kind of ignore the issue, and it literally took Nick Shorley, the independent journalist from X, a Gen Z guy, a young Gen Z guy, to just go man on the street, interview it up, and hit up these daycares to see what was really happening. And when he did that, it went viral, which of course forced all of the mainstream media sources to then act like this was a big story that they've been looking into already, and oh, this is a big deal. These mainstream media sources were perfectly content to never cover this until this young guy did it. Right. And actually, in all honesty, I was disappointed Trump didn't give Nick Shirley the shout out, because he should have. But yeah, the Democrats, this is where they were hooting and hollering, and Trump was ragging on Somali fraud. And they were very displeased. They were angry. It was always the women that could be heard, screaming like little disgusting, bitches in like ruining the decorum of the event, but in the most funny way. Like I said, I watch for that stuff, so I'm gonna rag on Democrats for their bad behavior. But if I'm being honest with you, I secretly love it, not because it's appropriate, but just because it's hilarious. It's outright hilarious. So he goes over that. He then announces J.D. Vance will be overseeing the fraud department that they've now created to deal with this kind of stuff. And we'll see where that goes, too. I mean, in all honesty, was this not supposed to be Doge? I just ranted about Doge last night and how this administration really didn't handle Doge or manage Doge properly. They ousted Elon Musk from the position too soon, which was originally supposed to be a time-limited position, but, you could tell behind the scenes it was not going over well. They weren't happy with the actual results being found by Elon Musk. They wanted stuff like this covered up. And it really does tie into itself, right? Like I just said, mainstream media was content to never report on this Somali fraud, and no administration was really content to ever discuss it either. It took a regular guy on X to uncover it. Doge was probably on the verge of uncovering it to some degree as well, but, it all ended too soon. And you got to ask yourself why. And examples like the Somali fraud are a perfect example of very likely why Doge was ended so soon, and why Elon Musk was ousted. That's the kind of dirty secret stuff that these politicians seem to almost work together on in bipartisan fashion, because it's like a kind of a cover up, and it's terrible that it's happening. And I guarantee you, Minnesota's not the only state. You think that's the only state where this happened under Tim Walz's watch? Absolutely not. Which is why Nick Shirley's been in California lately. He believes that stuff like that's happening in California under Gavin Newsom's watch. So it's happening. Doge should have never been treated and managed the way that it was, because if Doge was still around, it very likely would have found this stuff. That was the purpose of Doge. And now we're in this weird kind of situation where Doge is not really a thing anymore like it should be. Elon's not present, but it's going to be J.D. Vance now overseeing it. It's like, I don't know. I don't really agree with the way that it's all been handled, but that was his announcement on that. Bring back Doge, says Bill Desmet. I agree, man. Dearborn, Michigan needs help. Dearborn, Michigan does need help, but what do you know, that's being colonized outright, basically, Dearborn. I actually have a playlist on this channel devoted to Dearborn. But, you know, what are you going to do, you know? These are the consequences for that. I don't know what can even be done about that at this point, other than you just start revoking citizenships, really. But from here, he goes on to Trump goes on from the Somali fraud to mention illegal immigrants, and this was he tells some sort of a story. I couldn't pay full attention to the story, but it was a little girl named Delilah who had major medical complications after some sort of devastating incident, and it seemed like he was tying it in with the fact that illegal immigrants can obtain commercial driver's license, which is so stupid that we've ever been that these states are in these positions where they're allowing that to happen. Trump humorously literally says, I wrote it down. What did he say again? He said, many illegals can't speak English or even read the most basic of street signs, which is funny. It's disparaging to illegal immigrants, but rightfully so, and it's completely based in true. And it's startling to see. And we've all seen the accident footage now, I'm assuming, of these friggin' illegal immigrants that come into this country and get these licenses, most of the time coming out of California, surprise, surprise, or, you know, the Pacific Northwest region, super liberal, super progressive liberal up there, right? They come out of these states driving a big ass truck and they do something completely stupid that costs people their lives. And that has to end. That shit has to end. And so Trump announced he's going to federally block the states from granting illegal immigrants commercial driver's licenses under what is now being called the Delilah Law. And that law was named in honor of the little girl Delilah, of course, who was there in attendance that day. Yes, and he moves on to, the violent illegal alien murder as well. And then this is something I want to talk about. Actually, let me look at you still believe anything Trump says? You're not listening if you're asking that question, Sober. So I got a proposition for you. How about you sit down, shut the fuck up, and just listen, okay? How about you do that? So he goes on to discuss this another story and back to back after Delilah, the Delilah's law when it comes to illegal immigrants not receiving commercial driver's license. He goes on to share the story of this violent illegal alien who murdered this woman, in her house, and he shares that as a reminder why they're deporting the worst of the worst. And this is where I want to point out the narrative change that I've talked about when it comes to Trump and his immigration and deportation policy. And it's been very obvious. He didn't at any point reference mass deportations. He didn't at any point really say too much about America first when it comes to immigration. He didn't really talk about it like that. He said, we're deporting violent criminals. That was his words. And that's because he has changed his game plan when it comes to immigration. I personally voted for Trump to deport every illegal immigrant in this country. I believe everybody who's in this country who's undocumented, not a citizen, I believe that they are illegal. I believe they're criminals, and I believe that they should be all rounded up and detained, prosecuted in a cell, like in an alligator Alcatraz level cell. They can be being bit by mosquitoes while they face their immigration, while they experience a prosecution at the hands of an immigration judge who's deciding their citizenship and everything else. No proof of citizenship, no papers, you're in this country illegally, get the fuck out. That applies to 93-year-old grandmas who wouldn't harm a fly. That applies to 8-year-old school children who wouldn't harm a fly. I don't want any of them here. I despise the fact that any of them are in my country. This country is for Americans. And an American is someone who was born here legally to parents who are here legally. And I support a complete immigration moratorium where we shut down immigration in this country for the next 20 years. And the problem, honestly, one of my biggest issues with Trump actually is that he's soft on immigration. He always has been, actually. He talked a bigger game during his campaign for this term than he is willing to deliver on. And he's been backtracking ever since. It didn't even start with the pullout from Minneapolis, Minnesota, that we're now witnessing, where he's surrendered to Democrats on that, pulling out Greg Bovino, putting in Tom Homan for PR control, and then making a deal with Governor Tim Walz to have access to the prisons now. If a violent illegal immigrant is arrested by state or local police in Minnesota, now ICE gets notified. That's the deal. And in exchange for that, Trump ends Operation Metro Surge and pulls out thousands of ICE and Border Patrol agents from the state. But the problem with that is it's already an Obama administration policy. It's an Obama era policy that the states and the local authorities will call ICE if they arrest a violent illegal immigrant. Obama had that put in place already. It's been a long-standing policy. And so, like in a lot of other cases with Trump, when it comes to these negotiations, he's negotiated for something he already had. He did the same thing up in Greenland with Denmark. We already had the right to expand military bases up there. We just needed to call Denmark first. He moved the permissions up there. He moved the deal in America's favor by a sliver. Now we don't need to call Denmark first and ask permission. Like, that's not a deal. We needed to own Greenland. We need mass deportations at a massive scale. We need 5 million illegal immigrants deported in his term by the end of his term. We're not going to get that. The numbers are too low, and he's already backtracked severely so. And in fact, he's undoing a lot of his work by being pro H-1B visa and pro Chinese students, pro foreign exchange students. We need to end all of that. We need to end all of that outright. No more foreign exchange students. No more illegal immigrants. No more H-1B visa workers. And it can't just be the worst of the worst. It's got to be every one of them, every single one. And that's why I say 93-year-old grandmas, 8-year-old school children, doesn't matter. I despise the fact that any of them are in my country. They don't belong here. They belong back where they came from. But that was the narrative switch once again being reinforced during this State of the Union address speech, where he says we're getting rid of the violent criminals. He shares that story that makes you, it makes you feel something. This is what was happening during this speech, and why I say you got to separate the propaganda from the reality, because a lot of this was GOP slop, GOP slop, GOP slop. It was feel-good stories or heartbreaking stories that lead to us, getting rid of the worst of the worst. The worst of the worst is not good enough. Bottom line. I'll take a look. I see what would you do if you were president, says Squidman. If I were president, the first thing I would do, literally, I don't know if I should really even answer this question, because I'm still so young. I have a lot of life left to learn, but I know what's wrong with this country for sure. And some of the first things I would do if I were president would be centered around immigration, without a doubt. Immigration right now is one of the biggest threats our country is facing. It just is. I would end H-1B visas immediately. Hour one of being president, it would actually be one of the first things I sign into effect. H-1B visas are done. L1 parking loop, done. Any method that can be used to allow foreign workers into this country to replace Americans, done. Over with. Completely gone. And then from there, I guess I just continue cracking down on immigration. There's just too much to cover, though. You have to cover foreign policy. Like I would keep the tariffs in place, obviously. What I would do about Iran and Israel would be very tricky. I'm somewhat opinionated on that region, but I'm not a Middle East specialist, and I don't pretend to be. And so I would want to listen to advisors on that, but then I don't know if I could trust the advisors talking to me about it. So, Ukraine and Russia, for instance, I could tell you what I'd do about that. I would abandon Ukraine entirely, and I would lift sanctions off Russia, flat out. Fuck Ukraine, I don't give a shit about them. So that one I have down. But when it comes to Israel and Iran, I don't really like either that much anymore these days. So it would be tricky, for sure. And that's why I don't really want to answer the question, because I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be somebody that has everything figured out. I just know when I'm watching a president work, I know what I like and I know what I don't like, so. What about the Orthodox Jews on decade of welfare? I haven't heard that. I haven't heard about Orthodox Jews being on welfare. I will take a look at that. It was exposed this week on a document well, I have to look at the source, but we'll see. I'll take a look at that too. I'm very passionate about immigrants in this country not being on welfare. That's a big one for me. You look at just how many of these immigrants come in here, legal or otherwise, and wind up on our welfare. That's a travesty. I'm of the policy on this channel of America first, to the point where I say you must be born here in America to be on welfare, and we need welfare reform. It needs to be way more restricted than what it is, and it needs to not be as good outright as what it is. But it's for Americans. I'm of the policy of, if you come here as an immigrant, even if you're a legal one and you wind up on welfare, you're going back home forever. You're banned from America. Citizenship revoked. Get the fuck out. You're not going to be a leech on our society. You're not here to be a parasite. You're here to make our country better. You're here to serve Americans. That's how I view immigration. And so when I see stats like 63% of Afghans wind up on welfare, that's inexcusable to me. Every one of them should be deported immediately. Anchor baby. Yeah, I saw the anchor baby stuff. China's really taking advantage of that one. Israel is God's chosen, and we are instructed if we turn our backs. That's not true. That's not true, and I'm not here to debate you on that. You need to reread. You need to understand the context of Genesis way better than what you do. Your sources is being misrepresented there. And I'm not even anti-Israel, by the way. I don't care if Israel exists as a nation state. I really don't. I'm a millennial. I have Middle East fatigue. Israel can exist, but Israel needs to stand on its own. That's where I'm at with that. I just don't. I want America to be utterly divorced from that region. I'm of the take, basically, when it comes to what's going on with Iran right now, which I was going to get into in a second here, because Trump does talk about Iran during his State of the Union address speech. But I'm of the opinion, basically, of I'm not really comfortable with the idea of Iran having missiles or nuclear power either, but they're very far away from us, and if our allies are really our allies like NATO and Israel and the UK, they're way closer to Iran than we are. So they should be taking the lead on dealing with Iran. We should be taking the ultimate step back by not using any of our military whatsoever, and only possibly sending emergency medical aid if the UK, NATO, Israel sent soldiers in to deal with Iran, and it winds up turning into some sort of a battle. I'm in favor of sending a little bit of money their way to help out with medical supplies and aid. Sell them weapons, of course, profit off of it for sure. But in regards to us having a hands-on approach like we do in that part of the world, I am completely against that. It's time to completely divorce ourselves from the Middle East entirely. We are at a point now, from a geostrategical lens and geopolitically speaking, where we need to be focusing on the Indo-Pacific a lot more. I want to cozy up with Japan. I want to treat Japan the way we treated Israel the last 30 years. Japan is going to be a key strategical location for us. We need to own Greenland. We need to focus on the Virgin Islands. We need to focus on the territories we own out that way. That is the future. This Middle East stuff is a distraction. It's very expensive and costly, and I recognize it's potentially all very threatening, but if our allies are our allies, they can deal with it. And I say that knowing that it's not true. I say that knowing NATO is useless. I say that knowing that Israel doesn't ever want to send. Israel always relies on our soldiers. That's just the bottom line. They just do. Britain is useless. So that's why I say that. I say that to stir up rage, because the fact of the matter is it should be that way, but it isn't. And it isn't because they all grandstand against America, and they all pretend to hate us on the world stage, except Israel. Israel's actually more politically inclined and more politically savvy, and they always say, we're the greatest ally. Oh, we love America. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. So Israel actually they at least don't grandstand against us. I actually give them props for that. That's the one good. They at least sing our praises to us. They kiss our ass. NATO, on the other hand, Britain, for instance, absolutely disgusting to me. I want us to give the fucking middle finger to NATO and leave them high and dry. Throw them over to the Russian bear and let them be devoured. Fuck them all. Honestly, fuck them all. And Israel can kiss our ass publicly. But the bottom line is we need to divorce from all of that. We need to just get out of there. We have so much to focus on internally as a country. We have a whole Western hemisphere to deal with. So that's my take on that, honestly. Now, so from here, back on track. Immigration in this country at his State of the Union address speech. Trump blames Democrats for the open borders, which is true, and references that they are blocking the DHS from being able to be funded right now. This infuriates me as well, though, because This is what I'm going to call out outright. This is the problem with the Republicans because what he's saying is not even false. He's right. He's true. He's speaking truth. They are being blocked currently. It's still technically like a partial government shutdown, but this is just cucked GOP politics that we're witnessing take place. This is as easy as nuking the filibuster to pass it all, and it's what the Republicans should have done during the first government shutdown last year, the one that went for a record length of time. What we're watching is the Democrats manipulate and play the political game perfectly, all the while the Republicans just bend to the will of the minority party Democrats on the political stage of America and embarrass themselves. Republicans need to get to a position where they wield power effectively. And wielding power effectively looks like nuking the filibuster and watching the Democrats cry like little fucking bitches while we pass all of the shit that they don't like. Instead, we have the President of the United States, the executive, standing up there for the State of the Union address and crying to everybody about how the Democrats are holding up my agenda. They're blocking the DHS funding bill. They shouldn't be able to. It's not hard. This is a very easy situation to avoid, honestly. It really is. And so hearing stuff like that is like self-victimization once again. And it almost makes me feel like the Republicans have become more liberal with their crybaby antics and their crybaby persona, their victimizing bullshit. Oh, the Democrats are holding us up. They can't. The Democrats can't hold you up. You're allowing them to hold you up. Oh, Squidman's out of here? I am heading to bed, man. Have a good night. Love the stream. Thank you, Squidman. I appreciate you. Good to have you back too, man. Really appreciate that. Yeah, it's a later stream than I'd like, but I'm just doing it because I watched the full State of the Union address speech. I watched the Democrat response, which I'm going to cover as well because that's actually important. The Democrat response highlights the contrast and the shift in political narrative that we will see in the midterms. So I'm going to cover that in a little bit later. But it all took a long time, and I was working while I was listening to it. So I was like speeding home to do the stream basically. So it's a later one than normal. But thanks for tuning in, Squid Man. Appreciate you. By the way, guys, please be sure if you haven't already, you're watching on your phone, double tap the screen. That's what allows you to like the live stream, and liking the stream helps the stream perform better in the algorithm. Also, subscribe to American Advocates if you haven't already as well for more content like this. Now, so I'm already outraged at that. And he goes on from here after mentioning that they're shutting down DHS funding. He goes on again. It makes me laugh, but he calls Democrats out to their face and tells them, this is I was dying laughing at this. Ilhan Omar was screaming and shouting and hooting and hollering like some sort of deranged animal and going off. She was already mad about the Somali fraud comments that he made. Here he was looking at them and telling them that it's all their fault, the immigration and they're scum basically. And he's calling them all out. They're all outraged. They have the fuck ICE pins on their shirt, which is real classy. And then he says, you need to end sanctuary cities. And they're just going off at this. Ilhan Omar is like enraged. She is just screaming and shouting. At one point, I thought she was for sure going to be kicked out by the sergeant at arms like Al Green had been earlier, but she wasn't. She toned it down kind of quickly, but it was funny to watch. And fuck Ilhan Omar. She shouldn't even be in this country anymore. So, and that's another thing where it's like I'm laughing one moment, but then I'm processing what's happening and I'm thinking about reality the next. And then I'm realizing, no, I'm still actually angry at Trump about a lot of stuff because it's funny to watch him rile up Ilhan Omar. But then I'll also just remember, I'm like, yeah, but wait a minute. If Trump had any balls, he would have stripped Ilhan Omar. He would have investigated Ilhan Omar for her fraud. For representing the state where we uncovered all of this Somali fraud. Is that a coincidence or what, right? Like there should be an investigation happening. We should already be at the she shouldn't even be there. She should be sitting in a jail because she should be going through a series of prosecutions in court now at the hands of Pam Bondi. But instead we have that useless blonde bimbo bitch who's our U.S. Attorney General leading a toothless Trump administration and Department of Justice. And we have Trump who only ever bitches about this stuff on social media, but never is content to really hold his administration's feet to the fire to get this stuff done. And what we should be at is we should be at a point now where the prosecutions are going to lead to a guilty verdict on her because I can't prove she's guilty of the fraud, but I have a heavy suspicion that she is. And they've already uncovered stuff about her winery business too. Look into that. that was supposed to be based out of California, and basically it looks at least like it's a money laundering operation. There's no wine even being made there. And so it's like we should be at a point now where Ilhan Omar is already out of this country. She should have her citizenship revoked. She should be ousted from her office, stripped of power, stripped of all of her assets and wealth. It should all be re-diversified amongst the citizens of her state who she stole it from. And then she should be deported to Somalia with nothing but the clothing on her back. Again, somebody asked what I would do as president. That's an example. I would at least try to achieve that goal because I think, according to everything I've seen, there's a good chance Ilhan Omar is guilty of defrauding our government and stealing, corruption, etc. Can't prove it. Not saying she is, but I think there's a good chance of that. And the fact that she hasn't been really formally investigated, there's that rumor that she married her brother. It's like this stuff needs to be investigated. Prosecution should be underway. The deep state should be experiencing prosecutions and justice right now. We're not getting that. So one moment I'm laughing at Ilhan Omar standing up and shouting and hooting and hollering, and I'm like, yes, Trump based. I love it, Trump. Rile them up. Fuck the liberals. Yes, they're all scum. And then the next moment I'm sitting there and I'm like, yeah, but you know what? Ilhan Omar shouldn't even be in this country anymore. So fuck this Trump administration too for not doing what needs to be done. And that's really where I'm at right now as a conservative voter. So that's what I say. It's like I want to love this administration, but like when you actually take a step aside and detach yourself from the propaganda and the aura of Trump, and in the moment he's hilarious. When you take a step aside, you take a deep breath, you have to think logically. Don't be a zealot. You have to understand what this actually is. So, and a lot of it's performative. I love Trump. I want to love Trump, Texas Jane. I do. I voted for him. I'm socially and fiscally conservative. And at times I love Trump. Trump to me is like a very based grandpa. It's like he'll say offhanded remarks that are true but inappropriate, and you're like, fuck yeah, I love you. I love you, man. And then the next moment though, you're looking and you're like, I can't believe you just did that. That's so retarded. That is so dumb. You're so out of touch. You don't understand the young generations. You don't get it. And that's the turmoil that I'm at with Trump, honestly. Beautiful, says Levi Robinson. Bro, you can't deny he's not completely in control. He's not. You mean I can't sit here and tell you he is? He's definitely not. Trump is definitely not complete. You can't deny at this point that the Republicans aren't completely in control when they should be. They control everything. The people gave them control of our politics on a silver platter during the 2024 election. We said, you know what? We hate the Democrats so bad and what they did in the Biden regime. We're just going to give you Congress, Senate. You already have the Supreme Court and the executive. And what have we gotten? Not nearly enough. We've gotten a few good things, a few gestures of goodwill early on, and now it's nothing. And now we're back to a bunch of nonsense. I agree with you. I agree with everything you have said. Thank you. I appreciate that, Levi Robinson. If you're new, be sure to subscribe to the channel then, because I go live mostly every day. Also, double tap at the screen if you're watching your phone to give the stream a like, because it helps the stream perform well in the algorithm. If you're watching this and you haven't liked the stream yet, like the stream. It really does help. Moving on here. He goes on to, he kind of wraps this all up in a bow. And once again, he says some good stuff here. This is another example. He calls on Congress, calls them out, and Senate, and he even mentions John Thune's name, which is the co-conspirator here, the person that needs to be addressed the most on this. He calls on them to pass the SAVE Act. And yes, for the love of God, they need to pass the SAVE Act. In the same breath, pretty much, he talks about ending mail-in ballots as well, which is once again very crucial for the integrity of our elections. Mail-in ballots should be an exception for very, very small percentages of Americans. Almost every American currently who votes should be forced to go to a poll to vote. And the SAVE Act must be passed. And I agree with that. The Democrats are instantly riled up while he says this. They're going nuts once again. And then they get even angrier when he says that the polling for the SAVE Act is at 89%, which of course includes a large chunk of Democrats who support it as well. It's very common sense. The Dems are furious when he says this, though, and they're almost trying to shout over him talking about how 89% of Americans support voter ID. So it was another funny moment once again. The Democrats truly are such clowns. They're the laughing stock of the world, and it is funny to watch them just freak out at this kind of stuff. especially because it becomes so obvious to just how much they hate Americans, how much they hate men, white men, American men in general, white, black, or otherwise. It becomes very obvious just watching that stuff and how they respond to stuff like, well, I think we should be forcing people to show their ID to vote so that way illegal immigrants can't vote. And the Democrats, boo, boo, oh, can't believe you say that, you're a racist pig. They get so mad. And it's just like, it takes the mask off of them. It rips it right off their face and just exposes them. So it is funny no matter what. No matter how critical I am of Trump or how he's disappointed me, moments like that, again, I'm just like, this is great stuff. And then humorously, he goes on to reference Zoran Mamdani, who he's like, I like the guy. I disagree with his policy, but I like him. I talk to him a lot, actually. And then he mentions the New York City blizzard. New York, you picture as a state that gets a lot of snow, but New York City is like in this region where their winters actually, when you look it up, it's like it actually tends to be a lot more rain and like cold, but not a lot of snow that sticks around. Well, they got hit with a blizzard, which is kind of unusual for them. So Zoran's been recruiting people for these shoveling jobs, paying like $30 an hour, I guess. But you have to show 2 forms of ID to shovel. And so he points out the irony of that, where it's like if Zoran Mamdani, a Democrat socialist basically, is requiring 2 forms of ID to make $30 an hour shoveling snow in New York City, but then on the back end, in the same breath almost, will say, well, voter IDs aren't we shouldn't do voter IDs. The Democrats as a whole are saying this. It's like it doesn't make sense. And he points that out, and the Democrats get mad once again, and they're booing, and they're going nuts, and they're acting like animals, as usual. So he does mention that. That's another great topic, another great point that he brings up during his speech. Once again, I'm in support of it. We need voter integrity in this country, and it's very common sense. But you have John Thune in Senate right now, who was just trying to almost like sneakily not address the what was sent up to him from Congress. So you're an idiot, says James Taylor. I'm going to show that. I don't know why. Why would YouTube hide that? Why would YouTube hide something that everyone in chat clearly knows is false? I am literally the smartest YouTuber out here. There's no one smarter than me. And for somebody who's a cattle, like just human cattle, like you, James Taylor, you're just useful goy. You're just useful. You're like swine. Your existence benefits me, but nothing you say has any meaning. But why YouTube would hide that, I don't know, because it actually helps me in the algorithm to get more chats. So thank you. Thank you for being useful goy. Hypocrites, 2 forms of ID, says Bill. Yep, 2 forms of ID for snow shoveling, but when it comes to voting for like leaders that will have an impact on the world, and most importantly Americans, shouldn't need ID for that. That's Democrat logic for you. You're giving yourself too much credit, says Squishy Squiddy. You mean not enough credit, right? Anyways, yeah, and from there he wraps that one up again to Democrats jeering and booing and losing control and hooting and hollering, mostly women shrieking on the Democrat side. And he says, the only reason, and hey, you can't deny this, the only reason Democrats don't want to pass the SAVE Act is so that they can cheat. And once again, it's just like, these are the examples where it's like, this is why I'll never fully hate Trump and why I will always have love for him and want to love him more than I currently do. Because stuff like that needs to be said, and I'm glad that he's saying it. And he says it right to their faces. And it's true. The logic there, it's the only logical explanation because it is so common sense. It's such a common sense idea to require IDs for voter registration and to vote on voting day. It's literally common sense. So much in this country requires ID as it is. Why not voting? From here, he goes on to mention, yes, this was hilarious. Hang on, let me take a sip of water. I'll take a look at, there's some chats coming in that are beanie, not beanie. I'm trying to read. His beanie is covering his tiny hat. Oh, I'm not a Jew, bro. Tiny hat like a Jew? I'm not a Jew. I am Russian, German, and British. All right, who's this? Listen, no spamming though, Gilbert. You can say what you need to say, but you can't be spamming. Keep those hidden. If you keep spamming, I'm just going to deport you out of American Advocates. Because he's USA first yeah, I'm America first, literally. I'm not a tiny hat wearer. I'm literally German, British. My heritage is German, British, and possibly Russian as well. And a little bit Irish. So, James, please tell us why. Yeah, why am I an idiot, James? They can't articulate anything, man. When you're asking somebody like that when you're asking somebody like James to tell me why I'm an idiot, they can't articulate. They're just here for ad hominems. They can't contend with somebody like me who actually speaks, intelligibly. They're just here. Oh, this guy's a moron. He's saying stuff that doesn't make me feel good. He's saying stuff I disagree with. Okay. So from here, this is where it gets even funnier. And I mentioned earlier on, I love how sometimes it feels like a Jerry Springer episode, these State of the Union address speeches, which is why I primarily tune into them in all honesty. Well, this is a great example. So there's this girl that's sitting there. She was invited to the speech. And apparently, I don't know if I got the story right. Like I said, I was trying to take notes, but I was also working at the time. I own a business. I'm very busy all the time. So I'm kind of like listening and working and jotting down notes all at the same time. And so I don't know if the story's completely correct, but there's like this girl that was in attendance who was like tricked into wanting to transition to the opposite sex and become a boy. And so this made me, I couldn't hear the beginning of the story. I was like only halfway paying attention at this point because I was distracted with working. So, but then I stop and I look at my phone and I see what's going on. It is fucking hilarious. So this girl's in the crowd and he's talking about how evil this is, and I agree, and how twisted this is, and I agree. And he says, we're going to preemptively ban states from being able to seize children from parents' custody to transition them to the opposite sex because parents would obviously try to intervene in a lot of cases for that. This is sick, twisted shit that these Democrats were doing, right? And it is. It's disgusting. And he's like referencing this girl. There's this girl in attendance who was like almost tricked into doing this. And like this was actually in discussion by a lot of Democrats to like, well, if parents are going to try to intervene and stop this from happening, the states need to be able to seize custody of the children to allow these children to change their sex. Not possible. Sick, disgusting. While they're showing this, they pan over to that one. There's this like transgender guy who's pretending to be a woman, and he's in Congress, and he's sitting there, and he just looks so angry. And Trump's just talking about how disgusting and disturbing this is, and the guy's just sitting there, and he's just like super angry. He's trying to look like a woman, but he looks absolutely disgusting and terrible instead. And he's like a member of Congress. I can't remember his name. It's not even worth knowing it, right? But every time I see him on X, I'm just disgusted. And he's sitting there so angry. And it's like the timing of the camera work for the State of the Union address speech was flawless. It was flawless. It literally felt like Jerry Springer at times, and I was eating that stuff up. I was dying laughing. I was like, yes, this is great production quality by our government. And so he does do that. He does mention how they're going to preemptively ban the states from being able to seize custody of these children who are basically almost being tricked by the education system into thinking they are supposed to be the opposite sex. All for it. I love it. It's one of his most base takes by far. Again, one of the reasons I voted for Trump in particular, actually, immigration being my basically the main reason, but this is another big one. And it's even funnier because as he's saying all this stuff, he just looks over to the Democrats and he looks at them and says, "You're crazy. They're all crazy. They're so crazy." And then he goes on to say, "This is why they're not popular. Why they lost. Blah blah blah." And it's like, yes, fuck yes. Fuck these disgusting Democrats. So it was a great segment, and once again, it's one of those things where it's like I'm not even going to. There's nothing to criticize here. Just absolutely based, absolutely perfect. Needed to be said. Glad it was said. Animals, baboons, yeah. This guy could be hypnotized, says Mr. Mizat. I cannot be hypnotized. There's actually an interesting fact out there that I remember learning about hypnosis. It's apparently harder or almost impossible to hypnotize somebody who's a born-again Christian. I don't know how true that is, but that's what I was told they've done studies on, and that's what I am. So no, I cannot be hypnotized. I've never tried to be hypnotized, though, to begin with, but, Most humans can't be hypnotized. Some people can, though, and this guy definitely can. Yeah, I disagree. Definitely not. Immigrant, says Nigel. What? Who's an immigrant? Okay, from here, he moves on. He moves on from this, and this is actually appropriately placed, though, interesting verbiage at points, which I'll point out. But after discussing the transgender bullshit, which I'm glad that he's actively against, he goes on to mention the renewal of faith amongst young people. Now, the fact of the matter is, this is a complex social topic to discuss, and I pay attention to it very heavily. I think the sad reality is a lot of young men are moving more towards social conservatism and religion, truthfully, whereas women, in all honesty, young Gen Z women are more liberal than ever. And I don't really believe it's possible to be a liberal and a Christian. I think that that is just absolutely oxymoronic and absolutely ridiculous. If you're a liberal and you're claiming to be a Christian, you're not a Christian at this point. That's just bottom. That's just facts. That's the bottom line. The Liberal Party is unrecognizably evil at this point. It's not the Democrat Party that it was 30, 40 years ago, where they agreed with conservatives, where conservatives and Democrats agreed on like 80% of stuff just 30, 35, 40 years ago. It's not like that anymore. This liberal agenda, this modern day liberal agenda and ideology is wicked and evil and deliberately destructive to Western society. And that is the devil's work at play. And so I think with women, it's more of a grift, in all honesty. I'm just going to call that out for what it is. This is not one of those this is a political channel, right? And I talk about God a lot because I believe religion should be in politics. I am a Christian nationalist, after all. But, it's a loaded thing. At the end of the day, it is a good stat. But I see these women wearing crosses, and they kind of just wear crosses as a grift. They wear them as a fashion statement rather than wearing them with any actual meaning, because you'll see them wearing a cross while they're posing borderline naked for OnlyFans. And that is just, it's not true Christianity. It's disgusting. And women are at it's like the bottom of the barrel nowadays from a social perspective when it comes to women. They're worse than ever. They're more liberal than ever. They're pretending to be Christian because it's trendy. It's becoming trendy. And you have to be aware of that with women. They always grift onto trends. They always go for what's trending in society. And so whatever's popular, whatever makes them look virtuous to the public, whatever makes them look better, whatever's trendy in society, women will gravitate to. Which is why Christian nationalism is so important and why religion does belong in politics. Because over the long run, women will always do what their men do. And so it is important, and it's not completely fair to point that weakness out in women. But when he does say that there's a renewal in faith, even in that, I'm somewhat skeptical of, just from the standpoint of the fact that I think a lot of it's a grift. But I'm not dissatisfied with that being the reality now either. And I do see a lot of Gen Z guys who are very socially conservative and are returning to the church and actually Catholicism is making a big comeback, I think, but Protestantism as well. And Orthodoxy is trending upwards as well. That's a good thing. At the end of the day, even if it's not all genuine, sincere Christianity, if America is restored to its cultural Christian state that it once was, then this country will be in a much, much better spot. And so he does go on to say that, and he gives Charlie Kirk a shout out. He then gives Erica Kirk a shout out. It's like, all right, she pretends to cry as usual. And then he says, we must come together to acknowledge that we are one nation under God. Amen. Big amen. We are one nation under God, and we are God's favorite nation, without a doubt. There's no doubt in my mind that this country is God's favorite country. He even goes on to say that when God needs to use a country, when God needs to accomplish something, he knows who to call. I love that. I actually love that. And to some degree, that's true. And if you know ancient history, you know why we're blessed the way that we're blessed and why European nations for the longest time were blessed. We preserved Christianity when other countries rejected it or gave it up. We preserved it so that it could live on, and then it spread here to America naturally as people came here from European nations. And so it is upon us to restore those traditional values and go back and return to being the Christian nation we were always intended to be. That's how we remain in God's favor. So I'm a big proponent of that. Now he goes on to say, humorously, this is what I'll point out where it's kind of weird. It's like, it's a Trump thing to say, but he's like, I'm bringing back religion. I'm bringing it back. I brought back Christianity. I'm bringing it back. We've brought it back. It's like, all right. It never actually went anywhere. It just lost its prominence. So you can say you've made it more prominent, I suppose, or maybe you can tie Trump into that. But, to just sit there and say, I'm bringing back religion, it's like, oh, okay. All right. We voted him in. We love his self-aggrandizing talk, but it's like, okay, I rolled my eyes a little bit at that one. So let me take a look at these chats. You ain't no Christian. You are just a grifter Christian. I've been a born-again Christian since I was like 5 years old. Separation of church and state, bitch, says Big Daddy Bojangles. Yes, the separation of church and state was designed to protect the church from the state. No egregious regulations of the church from the state. They do not have a right to tell the church what they can and can't preach, etc. On top of that, the 13 original colonies all had original state-mandated religions that they basically declared for themselves. This country was written by the country's constitution was written by Christians. All of the 13 original colonies had state-mandated religions to hold. Well, a lot of them did. 9 out of 13, I think it is, had state-mandated religions. This country was intended to be Christian. There's no way around it. And a lot of those the amendment, which one was it? 14th. It's a bullshit amendment that was added in after the fact. We can talk about how bad it looked for Democrats when he said stand up. Yes, I was just about to get to that point actually. I'll say it right now. I'll use your comment, M. Saunders. Can we talk about how bad it looked for Democrats when he said stand up if you think the American government should look out for the American people, not illegal immigrants? Not a single Democrat stood up. Once again, another mask off moment, right? I mean, at this point, it should be undeniable to you. It should be obvious to you and undeniable that the Democrats despise you if you're an actual natural-born American. You have a right to this country that these illegal immigrants or even other immigrants coming in legally cannot have or shouldn't have, yet they're getting it. And that's the bottom line. And the Democrats just continually expose themselves with these moments where it's like, how could you not stand for that? And there they were, continuing to sit down. Dirty Jim, you're deported from American Advocates. There is no spam in here. ICE has come. ICE has deported you. Your face introduced to concrete, your arms shackled. Alligator Alcatraz, you're now being sent to where you will be relentlessly bitten by mosquitoes, waiting to be deported from American Advocates with shame. Hang your head in shame. Hang your head in shame. And I talk about Epstein at length all the time on this channel. So for Godzook 9856, I'm here to talk about the State of the Union address, not Epstein. Go watch my Epstein content if you'd like. I talk about it all the time. I criticize Trump for his handling of it all the time. Anyways. Yeah. How are you still drinking that orange Kool-Aid? I'm not. Literally not. God, get you cattle, you swine in the chat are so stupid. Do you guys ever get tired of being stupid? Does it ever is it I just got to know something. For the swine in this chat, is it as exhausting to you to be as stupid as it is exhausting to me to have to deal with your stupidity? I just want to know. Like leave an answer in the chat for me. Anyways, so after saying he was bringing back religion, he moves on to discuss something that needed to be discussed, and I'm glad that it did. He gives Anya Zarutska a shout out, and this is the mother of Irina Zarutska, the girl, the Ukraine refugee, I think she was, who was in this country and was killed on the subway train by a black schizophrenic man, stabbed in the neck, and then everyone around her who witnessed it did absolutely nothing about it. They looked the other way while she bled to death slowly. And in fact, the first chance they got, they left her to die. They just left the train car. This is something that we should never forget. And they wrote Irina's Law actually for it. Now, he mentions oh, how did that happen? Sorry about that, guys. My phone fell off the... All right. Take it easy. I'm back. My phone fell off the... It's Ukrainian, smart guy. What else did I say? And who cares? Ukraine's a scum country. Like I'm not here to like stick up for... Oh, what the fuck's going on? I'm not here to stand up for Ukraine. or get the pronunciation of a Ukraine citizen right. But Irina Zarutska was a tragedy because it occurred in our nation, and it occurred in a state that. Hang on, sorry guys, fixing this up. What the fuck? There we go. Oh, I see what's happening. My tripod's old. It's wearing out. Fuck. Yeah. I'm gonna have to find out a new way to mount this. Oh, fuck off. Oh, I see. It literally broke. Fuck. Okay. You know what? Fuck it. I'm just gonna hold my phone. I don't even give a shit. Okay. So yes, so he goes on to mention this, and he goes on to discuss Irina Zarutska. And this is important because this is a topic that the Democrats want to go away. They want it to disappear. They never wanted to address it. And once again, Democrats didn't stand for this. I believe this was actually discussed last year as well, and it was to the same effect. It was all bullshit. With the Democrats, they just don't want to acknowledge it. They don't want to address the issue. And so he mentions Irina Zarutska, and he calls out the Democrats with actual sincerity this time around for not standing. He literally ensures Anya Zarutska, the mom who's there in attendance over this, he ensures her that he will get justice for her daughter. And everyone in the room on the Republican side of the aisle stands up and claps. It's an emotional moment, and the Democrats don't. None of them do. And this is one of those moments where it's kind of performative, but even Trump's tone is more sincere than it is at other points in the night. He literally says, "How do you not stand? How do you not stand?" And there's it's one of the more sincere moments because a lot of the stuff's performative. I grant that. I think, like I said, a lot of it's GOP GOP slop. I'm calling it. But when it comes to this moment, it is one of those moments again where it's like this Democrat Party is just disgusting. These are subhumans. These Democrats at this point, they don't care about stuff. They don't care about Americans. They don't care about because it's Irina Zarutska, a white girl. They don't care about her. They only care about stuff that fits their agenda, and it's just gross. It's absolutely disgusting. So he goes on to discuss Sarah Bedstrom and Staff Sergeant Andrew Wolf, the soldiers who were shot in Washington, D.C. by an illegal Afghani immigrant. Sarah, of course, died. Andrew, who was also shot in the head like Sarah Bedstrom, somehow miraculously lived. He shares a great story about that. He awards Andrew he has a general award Andrew with a Purple Heart. I'm all for it. It's a great moment. And then he mentions 8 wars. The Democrats laugh at that. If we're being honest here, it wasn't 8 wars that were ended. Just to be real, these are like skirmishes and battles. And I rant at length about the fact that these are being called wars. And I rant at length about the fact that Trump focuses on this stuff so much. This is one of my gripes with Trump, in all honesty. So this is not one of the high moments for me where I'm thinking to myself, oh, this is wonderful to hear 8 wars being ended. Truthfully, I don't care. I really do not care about the wars being ended. I don't care about Thailand and Cambodia. They can both literally be blown to smithereens tomorrow, and I would sleep like a baby and not even give a shit. If Russia invaded Ukraine full force and took Ukraine, I don't give a fuck. I do not care about Ukraine. I don't care about Zelensky. I think he can go to hell for all I care. I don't care too much about Israel and Iran. I think Iran potentially is a threat maybe, but I don't want to deal with it, Iran. I don't think America needs to be dealing with Iran. Israel, NATO, the UK, they can deal with Iran. So I don't care about the Middle East. I don't care about any of these countries. I really don't. There's America, and there's America first, and there's the American people. This is what should be prioritized. And so he's talking about these 8 wars. Most of them were just battles. The Congo, the civil war in the Congo is another example. Okay, it was a 30-year-long war with literally tons of people dead. I don't care. I just don't care. And so he's ranting about this. He mentions the 9th war to end soon. Ukraine, again, I don't give a shit. Fuck Ukraine. He talks Iran. He talks Operation Midnight Hammer. And this is, again, where it's like, this is the low point of the speech for me, to be honest with you. Because at the end of the day, true sociopath. So Cole Ferguson, let me ask you something. You love what Trump's doing then? You think Trump's agenda with these wars, you support him ending these 8 wars? You're happy about what we're doing with Israel, Iran, and Russia and Ukraine then? You want those wars to end, Cole Ferguson? True sociopath? I don't care. I don't pretend to care like you do. You know what a sociopath is? A sociopath is someone who pretends to care about shit because they actually don't. I'm being honest with you. I care deeply about Americans. I do not care about foreign governments, foreign countries, foreigners. I just don't give a shit. So, you can say what you want down there, but at the end of the day, you're the virtue signaling scum in my chat, right? You live as a puss boy liberal and you pretend to be virtuous in some random person's chat. I have 14 views. You look really good right now in front of 14 people, not even in front of all of them, because some of them probably think you're the soy boy, puss boy bitch. If you want to say true sociopath, yeah, sounds very Christ-like. You can't handle that. Oh, what's a Christian supposed to do? Should I take off your shoes for you? Should I take off your shoes for you and give you a massage? Is that the kind of Christian you're used to? Get the fuck over it. Cole Ferguson, very, very Christ-like. Christ called the Pharisees sons of vipers. Back then, that was a killable offense, by the way. Assault somebody's dignity like that. He could have been killed for that. He called them a son of a viper. He called many of them sons of vipers. So if I call you a puss boy son of a bitch, I'm basically acting like Jesus, actually. And that's what you are, in all honesty, right? That's really what you are. Anyways, so he goes on to talk about Iran and Operation Midnight Hammer. And this is kind of the Iran propaganda that we're being sold when it comes to, oh, we need to go to war with Iran, right? He didn't outright say it. Many were speculating that he would declare war on Iran tonight and use the State of the Union address speech to do so, or at least propose the idea and kind of gear Americans up towards the idea of a war with Iran. He didn't, actually, thankfully. But what he did do was just remind everybody about Iran. And he said, you know, Iran, they were the roadside bomb specialists. They've killed thousands of Americans, which is true. You know, we had our Middle East conflict throughout all of the 2000s already. And you know, he mentions Operation Midnight Hammer. And this bothers me because we were told around this time last year, Operation Midnight Hammer was a resounding success. Or not around this time last year, but in the summer of last year. Operation Midnight Hammer, resounding success. We annihilated their nuclear capabilities. That's it. One and done. The strike was successful. We're good now. We don't have to worry about Iran. That was the narrative last summer, right? Now here we are this year, and the narrative is, oh, they're going to retry. They're going to rebuild their nuclear facilities. We got to stop them. Regime change is back on the table. We got to get involved in the Middle East. Move half of our military, I think it's half of our Navy right now is stationed over there right now. You know, it's a great thing we're the world's hyperpower right now, and that no country would dare attack us. Because if we weren't, and we moved half of our Navy over to the Persian Gulf there, and we'd be like sitting ducks, right? So it's all ridiculous to me. And Operation Midnight Hammer was at least halfway propaganda at this point, and we're all being forced to recognize that by this administration who fed us the propaganda last year and said the nuclear facilities are cooked. It's over with. We won, they're done, and they're going to be out of commission now for years. Fast forward just not even a year later, and we're being sold, oh, they're only maybe like 2 or 3 years away from being able to develop nuclear warheads. We got to hit them again. We got to go in. Boots on the ground, maybe. Regime change. This is expensive. This is the kind of stuff he campaigned against. Trump literally campaigned on no new wars. This is a campaign promise from Trump. And now it's back on the table, it seems. To his credit, like I said, the speculation was there that he was going to declare war on them or bring up the idea of it, and he didn't. So that's a relief. But he goes on to say they've built missiles that can now reach Europe and are working towards building ones that can reach America. And this is, again, where I double down on my narrative here. If NATO is truly our ally, if these NATO countries are truly our ally, if the UK is truly our ally, if Israel is truly our ally, this sounds like it's their war. If Iran has the capability to launch missiles that can reach Europe now, that sounds like NATO's problem, not ours. We've done enough for these countries. We've been involved in NATO now for 77 years, and that is 67 years longer than what was intended. And the bottom line is, the original agreement was for us to back NATO and back their defense and protect them from Russia after World War II so that they could rebuild their society and economy and eventually rebuild their military and stand on their own 2 feet. And it was only supposed to last for 10 years at most. It's now been 77 years, and every decade they've managed to avoid putting their own money into their defense budget because they recognize us as the hyperpower, even if they don't admit it on the global stage, or even if they use that to stand against us and call America out for being too tyrannical over there, they still rely on us for defense, and they reallocate those funds that they normally would be forced to put into defense into their perfect socialist societies. And so that's the problem we're facing now is these countries, they're incapable of defending themselves basically without America, or they're still very dependent on us, so they can't stand up to Iran. Not in actuality, though they should be in the position to. And if they were truly our allies, they would say, we've got this. Don't worry about it. Don't bother, America. No need to continue spilling your blood for Middle East affairs. That's our backyard, right? It is NATO's backyard, basically. And that's how I view that. And so if they have the missiles that can reach Europe, that's how I view it. That sounds like Europe's problem. How does that sound like my problem? Am I supposed to lose sleep at that over that at night? Am I supposed to stay awake at night at the thought of Europe being bombarded by missiles by Iran? And the answer is yes, because that means we have to go to war because we're in NATO still. We should be pulling out of NATO. We should not even be allied with these countries. They despise us. They're useless to us, and they're parasitic leeches to America. They're a drain on the American taxpayer. They're a drain on our country. They grandstand against us on the global stage. And the second we ask for anything or impose reciprocal tariffs on them to rebalance any perceived trade deficits, the second we say, hey, we need Greenland, what do? They go to the World Economic Forum and they start talking about how they want to deepen their relations with China. So fuck them. I hope they do get bombed by Iran. Fuck them, honestly, at this point. Fuck them. It's not my problem. So that's where I'm at with that. Let me see. The chats were starting to come in here. By the way, double tap your screen if you're watching on your phone to like the stream. It helps the stream perform well in the algorithm. And subscribe to American Advocates if you haven't already. NATO owes USA money. Yes. Yes, they do. And I've proposed this for our national debt. You know, when you look at the history of NATO, like I said, 67 years too long. The real thing we should be doing here, we have the leverage on them still. We should honestly go to NATO, all of NATO, each individual country, and we should serve them a bill. And we should say, hey, this is what you owe us. This is going to be collected and put towards you can buy our debt. It goes towards our national debt. We sell them that debt in the form of what they owe us, and that's their debt. That's how we should do that. With the threat of, if they don't, we leave NATO, we pull out all of our soldiers from NATO, and we leave them openly exposed to Russia. We need to throw around our power, our weight, our leverage like that, because our allies aren't our allies anymore. They despise us, and they abuse us, and they take advantage of our kindness. Sharknado. Great movie. Great movie. One of the best movies of all time. Some say the greatest. Sharknado. Trump campaigned on EBT McGriddles. Hey, Katie the Mage and Adam Onicus. Hey, how are you guys? Welcome. Welcome to the chat. Appreciate you guys being here. The EBT McGriddles. He did not campaign on that. You've been sold a lie. That's a Gavin Newsom campaign promise, I bet, though. And you need to go live in California, Katie, if you want EBT McGriddles. Omar promised me a daycare to wire my welfare to my family in Logos. See, great. That's a Great Lakes privilege right there to be able to open up a daycare. I say we all go to California. We open up a daycare and a McDonald's next door, and we serve EBT McGriddles, and we take in 3 children at most per day. And somehow we'll be millionaires. I guarantee it. Can't manage that. We need Greenland? You can't be serious, says Cole. Yeah, how about Cole? How about you actually contest the statement? Your questions are stupid. Cole Ferguson, useful goyim. You are useful cattle in my chat. That's all that you are. Quagula says, yeah, Greenland is one of those strategic points. Yes, it is. Well, here's where I disagree with you. I think we should annex NATO. That's ambitious. It'll just be the Afghanistan retreat all over again. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. 100, says Adam Monicus. Paranoid as fuck, says Paul Kelly. All right, so from here, uh, actually, on the topic of NATO, Trump actually goes right on to talk about NATO. And again, it doesn't bother me too much, but Trump openly says, NATO's our friend, they're our allies. I like NATO. I despise NATO, right? But he goes on to mention how he's gotten NATO to agree to pay 5% of their fair share at 5% for the military budget. Um, to that, I say, we'll see. We'll see. Because if you look at the history of NATO, like I said, this has been something that many world leaders in NATO have been called out for by prior American presidents. At some point, some of our presidents even threatening to withdraw from NATO if they don't. And they always say, okay, you're right. We'll pay our fair share. We promise. And they never do. And so we'll see what happens. I know that they were kind of forced into paying a little bit under Trump in actuality this time, but we'll see how long they sustain that. And the bottom line is Congress should have approved us leaving NATO in general. We shouldn't be involved with them, but Congress is full of spineless, ballless Republicans who won't approve that. And I think it's going to work against us. I genuinely believe that NATO despises America as a whole and that we should not be involved with them anymore. After that, he goes on to discuss the 1776 Warriors dividend that's been sent out to the U.S. military. I'm of course, always in favor of our troops receiving bonuses. And then he discusses labeling the cartels as foreign terrorists, as a foreign terrorist organization, and he starts discussing the Western Hemisphere more. And that's been one of the most popular things that he's done, in my opinion, and beneficial things. Re-implementing the Monroe Doctrine, which of course he unfortunately is not abiding by, as we continually send 50% of our Navy force to the Persian Gulf there to get ready to strike Iran, and as we continually stay ready for Middle Eastern affairs and Eastern Hemispheric affairs, which is against the Monroe Doctrine. Nevertheless, he gloats about the capture of Nicolas Maduro, which is great. He talks about labeling the cartels as foreign terrorists, which is wonderful. Declaring fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction. Sounds cartoonish to do that, but absolutely justified and perfect. I loved everything that we did with Venezuela, and I've been super open about how supportive I've been when it comes to what we did down there. I think it was the ultimate flex to the rest of the world to remind all of these countries how powerful we are as a nation. America's the world's hyperpower. There's no country that comes close to being as strong as us, not even China. Russia's been proven to be a paper tiger with their military. They can't even take Ukraine. And we just flat out captured a world leader. We kidnapped Nicolas Maduro in 2 hours and flew his ass back to New York State and threw him in a prison. And now we're taking their oil. And he mentions that at his State of the Union address. He mentions taking, I can't even remember how much oil. It's an obscene amount of oil. And yes, that oil is ours now. It was formerly China's because China used their in-debt slavery tactic on Venezuela. They loaned Venezuela $68 billion, and Venezuela has no hope of ever paying that back. So they were being forced to sell China, our enemy, their crude sour oil at a super discounted rate. And we don't want that to ever happen. And the Monroe Doctrine does state that. It basically states, without saying expansion, it basically expand the Western Hemisphere is ours. We need to have complete control of the Western Hemisphere. And one of the most beneficial and important things Trump did was rid Venezuela of its Chinese influence. We don't want China having a presence on our Western Hemisphere at all. And they were building telecom infrastructures in Venezuela. They were building new shipyards and seaports. They were getting ready to use Venezuela as a proxy point against us in what is basically the Cold War 2.0, a Cold War that's not against Russia anymore, but actually with China at this point. So it was great. It was great to do. I loved how he did it. He said world leaders called him to applaud his capture of Maduro and tell him how impressive it was. I believe that. And he also shares an incredible story about that Eric Slaver story, the helicopter pilot who was shot in the legs by a machine gunner and still managed to land the helicopter safely for the men so that they could arrive on the Maduro compound. Great story, excellent moment. He awarded that soldier with the Medal of Honor, which was very cool to see. I said a lot of this stuff today was GOP slop, I'm calling it, GOP slop, emotional slop, but this was a great moment, and I loved it. And then he went right on to award the World War II Navy pilot and captain, Royce Williams, for his heroism. That guy's a legend. You should look up his story. Absolutely amazing. Well deserved. Massive W. And he was given a Medal of Honor at age 100. He was there in attendance. Absolute stud. So some good moments there. From there, I'm going to cover the Democrat response, but I know the chats are coming in, so I'm going to take a look at a few of those. Sip some water. Arms getting more tired than normal since my phone mouth just broke while I was live here. Oh, hey, I see 2009 lifeguards here too. Yes, the Venezuela decision was a good one for sure. Absolutely. Just perfect from a geostrategical standpoint and a resource standpoint. Just everything about Venezuela I loved. He's got orange dust around his lips. What can I say, Michael, man? I love Cheetos, dude. I love Cheetos, especially the flaming hot ones. Cheetos, delicious. What other president threatened to leave NATO? Name them. You're simply clueless. It wasn't about threatening to leave NATO. It was about threatening to pull support. It was about threatening leverage against NATO. A lot of other politicians have raised concerns over the decades when it comes to NATO deliberately not dedicating the agreed upon funds into their defense budgets. They've been taking advantage of us. Earlier, you stated that Trump didn't need to seize Greenland because he could simply send personnel by agreement. Then we need Greenland. I didn't state that Trump. I didn't state that I believe that Trump doesn't need to seize Greenland. I'm saying that Trump agreed to not seize Greenland. Trump's agreement barely moves the needle on the Denmark deal that we had over Greenland from the 50s, where we could already expand and build military bases there. He moved the needle by now basically being able to build military bases there without calling Denmark and asking them for permission. So we have semi-sovereignty in Greenland. But I never said that I believe that Trump doesn't need to seize Greenland. I think we should seize Greenland. Absolutely, we should. We do need Greenland. We need it from a geostrategical standpoint for several different reasons. Trade routes that are opening up there, rare earth minerals, and perhaps most importantly, the Golden Dome. And having sovereignty of Greenland would be the most beneficial to us because history reveals to us how fast Denmark folds during world wars. And if you're unaware, it's months. We actually are. We are the reason why Denmark still has Greenland anyway. So should be collecting world leaders and putting them in a museum or trading them like Pokemon cards. Yeah, maybe. The Nicolas Maduro one is funny. I need a Cliff Notes version of the speech. I just can't watch him. Says it's tough. It's tough. He wasn't that bad tonight, though. In all honesty, he really wasn't too bad. He actually wasn't lifeguard. He was a little self-aggrandizing, but in a funny way. I actually like the self-aggrandizing talk. I think it's funny. Hard to believe someone hasn't whispered in Trump's ear, "Hey, say we instead of I" all the time. Yeah. Well, I pointed this out earlier. I don't know if you were here for it, but one of the things he did say today that made me roll my eyes is he said, "I'm bringing back religion." I was like, "Okay, dude, yeah, you're bringing back religion." Okay, yeah. In this Christian nation, Christianity was on the verge of disappearing if it weren't for you, Trump. Thank you so much. Yeah, because that's historical. Christianity just disappears until world leaders bring it back. It's like I just rolled my eyes at that one. So it's still there, but. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad tonight, in all honesty. And he had actually a few good moments. An unusually humble moment, actually, after the 2 Medal of Honors were delivered. He said, "It's an honor to be in the room with both of you." That's very uncharacteristic of Trump. So, although beforehand he said, I've been told you have to serve in the military to get a Medal of Honor. Otherwise, I'd give one to myself. So there you go. That was actually probably the most cringe thing that he said. But then immediately afterward, lost connection there for a second. The thing is, too, I wish he wouldn't joke like that all the time, but I'm not a tone policer. I'm not going to sit there and be offended. I may cringe a little bit, but it's done in humor. And the sincerity that follows it is, it's an honor to be in the room with both of you. It's like, yes, that's good. Unusually humble. You do a good Trump impression. Thank you. I listened. Hey, when you're doing a political channel like this, Lifeguard, you just listen to Trump all the time. I hear that man's voice in my sleep, dude. Like there's so many videos I consume now of Trump. It's just like I just sound like him now. Why not add Greenland, make some of 51, and inherit that GP? Yeah, maybe. I mean, I could justify that because there's not even enough people there to really sway our elections too much. Only 58,000 Greenlanders wouldn't really, like I'm not for Alberta becoming the 51st state, for instance, because I don't trust Canadians. Even conservative Canadians are way too liberal for my liking, so I wouldn't want them voting in our elections. But Greenland, it's like the population there is inconsequential. Trump is horrible to listen to. It's all cringe. Nah, it's not all cringe. Sometimes it's cringy, but it's not all cringe. Sometimes it's genuinely funny. Now, I wanted to cover real fast the Democrat response delivered by Abigail Spanberger, who's now the governor of Virginia. And some of the context here is actually important too. I want to point this out because this highlights the difference in narratives of the parties and the contrast of parties, and how a lot has changed since Trump has taken the office. So Abigail Spanberger became governor of Virginia last year in Virginia, a state that is basically always, it's been known to be a purple state, right? Republicans have at least always had a good chance of winning it. And it's usually voted blue, but very, very marginally so. It's like a light blue purple state. Well, Abigail Spanberger won Virginia last year by 15 points, becoming the governor very decisively. And so she delivered the bulk of the Democrat response after Trump's State of the Union address speech. And I'm not going to really go into detail too much of what she said. It's not. I didn't take extensive notes on it because she's a Democrat, so by default she's a moron and not really worth paying all that much attention to, especially not each sentence what she's saying. Her statements are stupid. They're typical liberal bullshit, typical female liberal bullshit. But there were some things I noticed. The theme of her speech is actually important to focus on because it shows the difference, the contrast, and what she was focusing on. How she really chose to open up her response was discussing affordability and the cost of living, and asking Americans if their cost of living and affordability has improved under President Donald Trump or not. And I've discussed at length how I believe Trump has really lost sight of that. He's lost sight of economic populism, and he's lost sight of it in favor of being the boomer's last gasp. So he touts about the economy under the guise of the stock market being better, the Dow Jones being higher, 401ks being up $30,000 more, when 50% of Americans don't even have a 401k yet. And today he addressed that and said he's making a plan so that more workers who don't have 401ks will have access to those retirement programs. But the bottom line is Trump is not viewing the economy through the right lens in order to maintain being an economic populist. He's discussing it from the lens of being a boomer who owns two homes, has a 401k that's been in the market for decades now, has worked a job for 50 years, and is living off of Social Security, Medicare, the 401k, home equity, etc. Younger people are not feeling the golden age. I think that should be very clear by now. I've noticed prices going up where I live, not down, especially in the grocery store where you really feel price increases. And I've covered reasons why that is on this channel already. And so her question's valid, and she led off with that pretty much as an opener. And what you're really seeing is the Democrats have figured out their strategy for 2026 and 2028 when it comes to elections. They're now going to be running on economic populism and, to some degree, corruption in the government. And these are probably the two most popular topics to run on right now. And by contrast, what we saw with President Donald Trump during this State of the Union address speech, what I'm calling GOP slop, GOP slop, we saw a lot of emotional stuff. We saw some good stuff mixed in. We saw Trump discuss how houses are for people, not corporations, and how he's trying to enact Wall Street firms not being able to buy up residential homes. That's a good thing. He was on a roll for some of this stuff, and he was speaking great stuff. But Trump has really lost the plot when it comes to the everyday American in this country. He's very distracted with foreign affairs, one of my biggest complaints. He's softened his stance on immigration, which at this point is the topic that really differentiates Republicans and Democrats. Because though the Democrats will run on affordability and corruption, they're going to run on it from a lens of phoniness. They're going to do so from a populist lens without the expertise to actually address the issue once they achieve power. They're going to fail. Democrats don't know how to make cost of living more affordable for the everyday American. They only know how to raise taxes. We've seen that with Zohran Mamdani. He's already discussing raising property taxes on homeowners in New York City. So the Democrats will fail, but they'll win because of this messaging. And the Republicans have dropped the ball on the economic populist messaging. And that's the contrast that we see with the Democrats' response tonight. Abigail Spanberger focused a little bit on corruption and a lot on affordability, whereas Trump, at one point in his speech, actually even brought up affordability. And he brought it up in a disdainful way. And he says, these Democrats, I do all this. I accomplished the border security. Great stuff. I've said it's great stuff. I've accomplished the border security, 0 crossings. We're deporting the worst of the worst. I've protected Social Security. The 401ks are up by 30,000 a year. He's like, and then they come up with this word, affordability. I don't know where they got that. I don't know where they got affordability. I don't know where they got that from. It's like, dude, they got that from the fact that our cost of living is borderline in a crisis and grocery prices have gone up and things are harder to afford now. And they haven't gotten better yet under Trump. That's where they got it from. They got it from the idea that elections are won off of economic populism. If you ever want to win an election, promise to make the people who are voting for you wealthier. Promise to ease their cost of living burden. Promise to make their life more affordable. That's really the most important topic to discuss on any campaign trail. And the Republicans are viewing it through the wrong lens, combined with the fact that Trump has openly stated he believes the affordability crisis is a Democrat hoax. And it's just not. And it's very out of touch. And it's going to be a problem for Republicans in the midterms. And the Democrats have figured it out. They look at the handling of the Epstein files, the big, massive black stain on this campaign or on this administration at this point. They look at it from that light. They look at corruption now. They're going to promise to prosecute Epstein co-conspirators and perpetrators. They're going to openly discuss corruption in the government, and they're going to run on economic populism, even if it's phony, even if what they run on is bullshit and won't work. It will win. We've seen it win with Abigail Spanberger in Virginia. We saw it win with Zohran Mamdani in New York City, and we saw it in a few other cases last year as well. Democrats winning those offbeat elections in 2025. So that's what I really wanted to point out. That's what's most important, and the Republicans aren't getting it. They're no longer attached to the everyday American. And, I have this bingo thing pulled up here because even though a lot of this wasn't actually on there, like Black Latino Americans wasn't on there, that was something I was going to point out. How often when does Trump talk about the everyday conservative American? When does he talk about being happy to be popular with young white men? He doesn't. When does he talk about loving or wanting to be popular with young men in general? He doesn't. When does he talk about any of that? He talks about the marginalized oftentimes. The Republicans are focused on winning over minorities. They're focused on winning over moderates and independents, but they're not focused on preserving their voter base anymore. And I think their voter base has moved away from them quite a bit. And I think they're in for a rude awakening in the midterms this year. We're watching the redistricting happening across the country. And in some ways, I like it. I like the Republicans getting down and dirty and redistricting their states to give their states a massive advantage to fight back on the disgusting Democrat corruption when it comes to gerrymandering, right? But I think despite that, I don't think the midterms are going to go over well for Republicans, even despite the redistricting that we're seeing with Florida, Texas, etc. And so I think it's going to be a rude awakening for them, and I think it's going to be a much-needed rude awakening for Republicans come midterms. I really do. And they kind of deserve it because they've lost the plot on what matters to Americans the most. They haven't delivered on Epstein, and they're not really delivering on cost of living for everyday Americans. And Abigail Spanberger's response tonight, I think, really kind of highlighted that contrast. Do people getting imports into their country and the businesses if they have to send goods? Tariff make our exports worth what they should actually be instead of cheaper deals for allies? I'm missing out on the conversation. How is tariffs making anything worse? You have no understanding of economics. Never discuss. Listen, don't cast your pearl to swine, Shaggy. That's my rule here. Never cast your pearl to swine. When it comes to the swine, the cattle in my chat, they just or goy. Ever since reading the Epstein files and seeing Epstein use the word goy all the time, I'm obsessed with that word now. there are just people out there like that where it's like they're not going to understand it. I've made videos at length about the benefit of the Trump tariffs and how important they are and why I love them so much, but they're not going to understand it. They're going to say stupid stuff like it's a tax on Americans. It's not. They're going to say stupid stuff like, it only hurts the importer. When we have now seen them work for a year, we've seen exporters doing exactly what I predicted they would do and absorb at least part of the tariff cost, which is why exporters are now demanding a refund over the Supreme Court ruling, which they're not going to get. And we've seen a whole host of other things happen. We've seen at the very least, pledges to reshore manufacturing, which is the general idea of the tariffs to begin with. And so you can't really explain that to a liberal. They believe what they want to believe. They're stupid enough to believe that tariffs caused the Great Depression. There's just no arguing with them. They're too emotional. They're not logical, and they want to believe what they want to believe. So it's literally a waste of time to cast precious pearls to swine. That one Alex Jones clip has aged like ancient honey. Which Alex Jones clip? Most Alex Jones clip aged like ancient honey. Actually, they have. You must live in a blue state. That's the only place that's unaffordable. That is not true, Mister Ballboy, Mister Ballbull. That's not true. Cost of living is technically up. Now, I'm sure there are other states that are probably poorer. No offense, where cost of living might have gone down, and that's good for them, I guess. But it's not universally down for every American. Spanberger winning by 15 in freaking Virginia should be a huge awakening for messaging. It should be 2009 lifeguard, but the MAGA cheerleader channels blow it off and they say, well, this is just what happens, and these are just offbeat elections. They're just 20. They're not they're not midterm elections. They're 2025 really elections. It doesn't really matter. 3 isolated incidents in states that have voted blue before. Not a big deal. It is a big deal. Excuse me, it is a big deal. It's a very big deal, and I've explained why on videos before as well. But yeah, I'm with you completely. And I think I think the Republicans have severely underplayed the severity of like Spanberger winning Virginia by that many points. That's a massive difference in points, by the way, compared to prior elections. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up, guys. It's been 2 hours. The past 2 streams have been long because I've had a lot to talk about, especially this time with the State of the Union address speech. But thanks to everybody who tuned in. Be sure to subscribe to American Advocates for more content like this. If you haven't already, double tap the screen right now. Double tap it right now to like the stream if you're watching from your phone. And I'll see you guys here tomorrow, most likely, to cover some news. Won't go as long. I can't keep streaming for 2 hours, but I appreciate all you guys for watching. Thanks so much. Glory to America. God bless the USA, and God bless you.